Welcome to everything you need to know before you embark on your Yellowstone adventure. We have a great panel today, and first I'd like to hand it off to NatHab's Field Operations Manager, Corbin Hawkins. Take it away, Corbin.
Hey, thanks, Kendall. Once again, pleasure to be here. I'm really excited about this one. This is my crew. This is who I typically work with outside of the pandemic. So this is exciting to be kind of back in the field with you, so to speak. I know we'll get there soon, but I'm excited and I look forward to sharing all this important information with you guys. But first, I would like to just introduce you guys, and then I'm going to move into some COVID stuff, and then we'll really get into the nitty-gritty of the trip. So Drew, take it away if you want to give us an introduction and let us know who you are, and then Kurt will do the same.
Sure, thanks Corbin. Well, my name's Drew Mccarthy, and I'm an expedition leader with Natural Habitat Adventures. I've been leading trips with NatHab since 2015. I've been working in the greater Yellowstone ecosystem since 2010. I'm from Alaska originally, but I'm coming to you today from my home in Teutonia, Idaho, right on the edge of the Yellowstone ecosystem. And I look forward to chatting with you all today about our trips in Yellowstone this summer.
Cool, thanks, Drew. My name is Kurt. I'm talking to y'all from beautiful Jackson Hole, Wyoming. So I'm based here in the Yellowstone ecosystem, just like Drew. Been guiding here for a really long time. And yeah, lead a lot of the photo trips related to Yellowstone. And yeah, look forward to sharing this beautiful part of the world with you.
Thanks, guys. We'll get back to you here in just a second, learn a little more about you. Before we do that, I'd like to introduce you Renata Haas. She is the Director of Field Staff at Natural Habitat Adventures and someone I work closely with quite often. Renata, you want to give us a little bit of information about yourself?
Yeah, so I oversee all of our field staff scheduling, and I'm also the lead on our COVID task force within our office. So over the past year, we've been digging into our COVID protocols and finding the best ways to run trips lowering risk. So I've been with NatHab for about 8 years now and working closely with Corbin, Kurt, and Drew during that time.
Thanks, Renata. Once again, my name is Corbin Hawkins. I'm the Field Operations Manager. I keep a lot of irons in the fire, so I'm working on operations in the field. The title is quite literal. Whether that's in polar bear season or in Yellowstone, if it's on the ground and we're making it happen, I've likely got a little something to do with it. And speaking of COVID, Renata, this protocol that you guys have come up with, it's a monster. It's this huge 20-page document, and I know you've been working so tirelessly on it. So I will just give you the floor here for a minute and let you tell us what that entails, what that took to get to the point that we're at now, and then we can move forward into the specifics about it related to this trip.
Thanks, Corbin. Yeah, it has been a very interesting year, to say the least. And NatHab has been running trips since last July. We actually, after COVID started, our first trips to run were in Yellowstone, our hidden Yellowstone itinerary. But we have been running trips. We've been running trips in the US, Africa, and Central America. And so far, we haven't had any transmission of COVID within our guests or field staff, which means that our protocols we're following them and they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. And we're very excited to see the trends that we're seeing. We're seeing substantial decreases in COVID transmission rates since sort of the holiday time period, and we're seeing a substantial push to continue to vaccinate everyone within the US. I'm sure everyone on this call likely knows 1, 2, 5, 10 people that have been personally vaccinated or have been vaccinated themselves, and that is an incredibly positive sign for where we're going to be going over the next few months and what summer is going to look like. So we're excited for that. To jump in briefly into how we developed our COVID protocols, I think it's very important for everyone to understand the effort that's been put behind the protocols that are in place to reduce the risk of getting COVID on a trip. So first and foremost, we needed to put a team in place to accomplish this goal of creating protocols. So I have been actually working very intimately with a team over the past year, just about, and we meet at least weekly. When COVID was, when we sort of first started talking about running trips during COVID, we met pretty much every day. Now we meet weekly. And there was a bunch of a pretty substantial process that we needed to put in place to develop these protocols. So first and foremost, we needed to take the time to research recommendations from the Center of Disease Control, World Health Organization to develop the skeleton of these protocols. After doing that research, it was important for us to collaborate with other experts in the adventure and outdoor travel industry to share best practices, get a lot of questions answered, and have that additional layer of communication. Next, after we developed our initial protocols, was to reach out and work with all of our partners in the field. So that is hotels we work with, restaurants, if we are utilizing any activity partners, to create a set of standards so that we knew that they were also meeting those standards. So we vet everyone that we work with in the field. We have also developed a screening process so that we can screen our expedition leaders, field staff, and guests with a daily temperature and symptom check, so that we have a good understanding of how everyone is feeling. If it's ever the case that someone is showing symptoms of COVID, we do have virtual doctors on hand and work with United Healthcare Global to get advice in the field. Next thing, we have a training plan for all of our field staff that we go through prior to the start of the season. So everyone is involved in that training plan. And then after training is setting expectations. We set expectations with our partners. We set them with our guides, with our field staff, and with our guests as well. So you'll see our COVID protocols online. And we also send out prior to the start of your trip the things that you need to help reduce that risk of getting COVID as soon as you leave your house. So that's 2 KN95 masks, that is hand sanitizers, that's sanitizing wipes, and face and buffs as well. So you have all of those things so that you can leave your house ready to reduce that risk for yourself. So that is the background on how we created these protocols.
And to sum it all up, Renata, thank you for that explanation. But to sum it all up, we've really come up with kind of 4 pillars, the combination intervention approach. You want to walk us through what those 4 pillars are and how we plan to execute them on the trip?
Absolutely. So we focus on a combination intervention approach because we learned that the optimal way to mitigate the spread of COVID virus transmission is to use a combination of interventions. Each of these controls provide an additional degree of protection, even if we are not able to maintain one component. So first and foremost, and we've all been dealing with this pandemic for just about a year. So the first one that we have really gotten quite used to in our day-to-day lives is respiratory hygiene and wearing a face covering. So we do require that all guests wear a face covering when they are inside, when they are in vehicles, and when they are outside and not able to maintain 6 feet of social distance between other individuals that are not in their traveling parties. I'll also note that we will follow federal mandates with face coverings if new rules and regulations come up. So respiratory hygiene is first. Next is physical distancing. So in all of our activities and in everything that we're doing, we're looking to space people out as much as possible to that 6 feet of space between individuals that are not within the same traveling party. And then after physical distancing, we have enhanced sanitation. So everything from how the food is prepared to high touch surfaces in vehicles. We have looked at those various components of the trips and are taking the steps to increase the amount that those surfaces are being cleaned. And then finally is hand hygiene. So everyone gets personal hand sanitizer that's at least 60% alcohol by at least 60% alcohol when they leave. Hand sanitizer will be readily available on these trips. The vans that you guys will be, the sprinters that you'll be in, each seat will actually have your own hand sanitizer, and then will allow for ample opportunity for hand washing at restroom stops, before and after meals as well. So it's really important to be frequently washing your hands. So along with these combination intervention approaches, we are also highly recommending that guests get tested 3 to 5 days before they depart for their adventure. And there's been a lot of questions about whether we are mandating vaccines. So at this point, even though I know a lot of Americans have been getting vaccines, we are not mandating that. We're constantly looking at it, but they're not readily available to every adult that wants it. So that is something we're not requiring at this point. But again, with our protocols, we are constantly monitoring and adjusting as we get more information and as more resources become available.
Okay, fantastic. Before we move on, Drew or Kurt, do you guys have anything to add to the COVID side of things here, or should we just hop right into it?
I can just throw in that we've been, we made these adjustments, and trips, like Renata said, have been going really well. No incidents. People have been, very tolerant of these changes, and it hasn't affected the quality of all the trips we've been running whatsoever. So that's happy news to report.
Fantastic, and we'll talk about it here in a little bit. There's actually a few things that have changed that I think personally even build the trip further and make them a little better. So before we get into the nitty gritty of the trips, guys, let's just retouch with you guys. What do you love so much about this place? Having been a local in Jackson for some time myself, I deeply adore this place, and I so enjoyed living so close to Yellowstone for a matter of time. What is it that brings you here, keeps you here, and keeps you guiding here?
Well, I'll speak that personally, the variety of landscapes that are contained within the greater Yellowstone ecosystem just never ceases to amaze. I mean, we have 10,000-foot granite peaks within an hour's drive of some of the most spectacular thermal features in the world. Not to mention almost 23 million acres of untouched protected land where some of the largest herds of large terrestrial mammals range in North America. So what's not to love? I mean, right here at my cabin, I could head straight out my door with a pair of skis and hopefully find wolf tracks within maybe an hour or two of skiing. So to me, just having that wilderness right at my back door, summer and winter, such an incredible variety of landscapes, and such really amazing access. So we're really able to access these areas and explore either on my own or with guests. Just makes me keep coming back.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. But I moved here 21 years ago or so, specifically for moments like what you can see up, which is an image of mine taken not far from my house. So I'm here for the wildlife. That's my background, is wildlife biology. I'm also a serious photographer. So love the landscapes, but there's just nothing else quite like what we refer to as the Serengeti of North America, which includes Yellowstone and Grand Teton, surrounding national forests, the elk refuge. It's just paradise if you love the natural world, if you love beautiful imagery. So that's what brought me here, and that's why I'm still here.
Yeah, couldn't agree with you guys more. And I know that for you guys listening, you're excited to get out here and witness the same things that these folks are talking about. So what I'd like to do now is kind of act as if I have never been here and I haven't been on one of these trips. And I'm going to just kind of probe some questions from you guys to, as if to prepare me for a trip. So I'll start with you, Drew. And, you know, in preparation for any trip, you have to pack. And so I know that the weather can be varied up there, but what do I bring? What's important to have? Do I bring my flip-flops? Do I bring my mucks? What's in my bag?
Sure, I'd be happy to address that. First of all, I'll mention that the trips that we're talking about primarily today are going to be sort of spring and early summer trips. So in general, when packing, you should really be prepared for anything from days that could be bluebird and sunny, like what's depicted here in this image, or dealing with snow. Snow can fall, and certainly in May and in June as well. So to start out, you want to make sure that you've got a relatively small duffel bag. So we suggest a duffel that is soft-sided, and you want to pack that to about 40 pounds. So it may seem a challenge to have all the gear that we're going to talk about in a 40-pound duffel, but people do it. And on top of that duffel, you're going to have a day pack with you. And so you'll have really those two pieces of luggage to manage your gear throughout the trip. I'll start out talking a little bit about outerwear. So it's good to have sort of a kind of a fleece jacket that you'll have and find that you're wearing it quite frequently in the mornings and in the early evenings. It's a good idea to have a rain jacket and make sure that you've tested that rain jacket. So you want to make sure that it is in fact weatherproof, as opposed to just a windbreaker. Hiking boots are quite important. You can see in this picture, this guest is wearing a pair of sturdy hiking boots. We are going to have opportunities for doing some short hikes on these trips, as well as stepping off the road for wildlife viewing. So it's important that you have sturdy footwear. Because of the May and June temperature variations, it may seem extreme, but gloves and a hat, definitely want to have those with you and handy in your day pack. In case you run into some colder temperatures. In terms of the rest of your clothing, a couple pairs of trousers, maybe one pair that's slightly heavier, one pair that's slightly lighter. Some long sleeve shirts with collars are quite good for sun. Also some short sleeve, either button up or t-shirts, maybe 2 or 3 of those are useful to have. Shorts, for the May and June trips, you may not find a use for shorts, but if we get some nice weather, having a pair of shorts might be useful. In addition, a lot of the hotels do have swimming pools, so though our itineraries are packed and there's not a lot of generally time in the evening, you may want to bring a pair of swim trunks if you think you might want to utilize one of the pools. Long johns are not a bad idea. We're going to have some early mornings on these trips, and having the ability to have a little bit of extra warmth if it's a particularly cold morning certainly will pay off. For sure. So having some long john bottoms, long john tops are useful to have as you're packing for these trips. We'll talk about some of the hard gear a little bit farther on in the presentation, but I do want to mention a few things in particular. We'll provide you a water bottle, we'll provide you a travel mug during the course of the trip, but make sure you bring sunglasses, make sure you bring a headlamp. A lot of wide open areas. We will probably be away from shade for long portions of the morning, so sunglasses are important. It can be a little noisy in some of the hotels, so earplugs can be a wise thing to have in case we run into those conditions. Insect repellent. In the spring, the insects can be a little bit on the fierce side in certain areas, so especially during COVID, we're minimizing the sharing of those types of products, so having your own insect repellent sunscreen are useful. And then hand sanitizer. So we'll be providing hand sanitizer, but if you have a particular taste or preference for sanitizer, you might want to bring your own.
Drew, what's your favorite flavor of hand sanitizer?
I really like bubblegum lilac. It's it's amazing.
That must
We're
be a
talking about
whole.
Yellowstone. It's got to be Huckleberry.
There you go. There you go.
Yep.
So just to make a little note here of my own, a lot of these trips I will actually be behind the scenes and setting up lunches on the side and hauling luggage. So I just wanted to share a little picture of what the inside of my vehicle looks like to further belabor the point that Drew has already made about keeping your luggage small. So this is about the room that I am able to work with, and I do need access in and out of my vehicle. So just when you're packing, be considerate of the limited space that we do have on these trips. So I'm packed, I'm ready, and I've just arrived in, let's say I've just arrived in Jackson Hole, or Bozeman for that matter. And I know that a NatHab representative, hopefully the guides will be there to pick me up. But what sort of vehicle can I expect to be in? And will this be the same vehicle that I'm in for the rest of the trip?
Yeah, most likely you'll be picked up in a vehicle much like this one. And there's always a possibility that it'll be a different vehicle, but the vehicle that you're looking at is the vehicle that's been designed specifically for these national park trips. And it's fair to say that a lot of thought went into building these vehicles to make them the most perfect safari van in North America. So they have high clearance, and so they're pretty good for when you go off the beaten path. Most importantly, and what takes typically over a year to customize a vehicle like this, but the real unique aspect is the customized roof hatches, and it basically allows for there to be no bad seat in the van. So even though they can seat 11 people, we don't ever put 11 people in these vehicles to make sure people have lots of room and that everybody's guaranteed a window seat. So even if you're in that back row, you've got a window, and most importantly, you've got these hatches. And there's a lot of real benefits to these hatches. One of which is it basically turns the vehicle into a mobile blind. And I'm sure many people watching are experienced wildlife watchers, whether it's North America or Africa, South America. But you probably get a sense that animals don't like to see the silhouette of a person. So we try and break up that silhouette in lots of different ways. And this is one of the most important ways to do that, is simply not get out of the van. We had an incident, a really cool moment just a couple of weeks ago, where we had bison moving toward us. And I could tell that the bison were not going to position themselves for good viewing or good photography until all we did is we shifted about 5 feet, and suddenly we saw a change in the bison's behavior, and they felt comfortable walking very, very close proximity in a safe way. So that's the idea behind these hatches, is that they make things safer, and they can provide better wildlife opportunities for viewing and for photography. We usually carry all sorts of other fun stuff on board. We usually have bean bags to support cameras. We carry spotting scopes. We provide binoculars that you'll have for your entire trip. But yeah, these are great vehicles, and yeah, typically we'll have 2 of them per trip, so everyone can space out really nicely and keep everyone very comfortable and with a lot of great opportunities for successful viewing.
Thanks, Kurt. And just to note here, Renata has already mentioned it, but while we're in the vehicles, we will ourselves be wearing masks, and we'll ask the same of you for the duration of the trip. Typically, when we do these Know Before You Go webinars, we're talking about locations where you might have internal flights or a boat ride or whatever it may be. It's really kind of nice on these trips that you are in these vehicles for the entirety of the trip. You're familiar with it. It'll be the same every day. And it's just, there's not a whole lot of to do as far as the vehicles are concerned. But we will be transferring quite a bit throughout the region, and we'll be staying at a variety of different hotels and lodges, depending on where, or depending on what itinerary you're on, might change where you're staying. But I wanted to just highlight with you, Drew, for a second, some of these types of locations that we'll be at, starting here at the Armory in Bozeman.
Sure, and I might just back up a little bit and mention one other thing about the vehicles that are good to keep in mind. So you'll be staying in the same vehicle for the duration of the trip, but the expedition leader will swap. So that way you're gonna have a chance, there is a fair amount of road time on these trips, and you'll have a chance to hear and spend time with the 2 different expedition leaders as the trip progresses. But to address accommodation, so this trip covers a lot of distance, and we'll be spending time in a variety of different accommodation throughout the course of the trip. This hotel depicted here in Bozeman, spectacular spot to start out, right in downtown Bozeman, so easy walking distance to restaurants and to shops, and even to some sightseeing within the town of Bozeman, Montana. But as the trip progresses, we'll be experiencing accommodation of a variety of different levels, I should say. So this is the Super 8, which is in Cook City. This is a spectacular location. So Cook City is quite close to the Lamar Valley, which is specifically selected for this trip because it gives us such easy and fast access to specifically the wolf watching areas of the Lamar Valley within the northeast corner of Yellowstone Park. So the Cook City Super 8, it's clean, it's comfortable, it's specifically located for wildlife viewing, and it will meet all of our needs as we spend time in that northeast corner of the park. We'll also have the opportunity to spend some time at accommodation within the park. And when I say the park, I mean Yellowstone National Park as well as Grand Teton. So this image depicts the Jackson Lake Lodge, a historic lodge specifically located right on the shores of Jackson Lake, right at the base of the Teton. So we couldn't ask for a more spectacular venue for some early morning wildlife viewing here at the north end of Grand Teton. I've many times been at this hotel where while we're waiting to be seated for dinner, we've had spotting soap set up and actually been watching grizzly bears, been watching moose, elk, a variety of wildlife while we're waiting to be seated for our meal. So this lodge is amazing and you'll really enjoy it. And then finally, as the trip progresses in Jackson, we'll be staying at the Lexington Hotel, which is also located right in the heart of downtown Jackson Hole. So again, conveniently located both for the parks and access to the parks and visitor centers, but then also the town of Jackson itself, where there's galleries, spectacular restaurants, a really great shopping, just a short walk from the Lexington.
And speaking of restaurants, Drew, one of the kind of silver linings that I was mentioning earlier about how we've had to change these trips is that although we'll still, I'm assuming, be eating in some restaurants, it sounds like we're gonna kind of expand our meal choices and kind of get out into some outdoor seating.
Yeah, absolutely. So certainly we'll take advantage of restaurants here or there. But I think one of the things that's really caused us to sort of push ourselves with these Yellowstone trips during the COVID era is taking advantage of field meals. So, you know, often we'll be eating kind of a quick breakfast out in the field. So we may take some orders the evening before. The guides, the expedition leaders will pick up those orders and then we'll head straight out. So the benefit is we get more time in the field to view wildlife, more time to absorb these landscapes. And so field meals will often be a quick breakfast. We'll have field meals set up for lunch. We'll have a dedicated operations staff on each trip that will assist in having those meals set up when the groups arrive. So there's not going to be a lot of time waiting for those meals to be set up. They'll be in the field and ready to go when the groups arrive. And again, at this very site right here, last year we had a number of gray jays. We had a sapsucker. So you can expect to be doing some birding while you're eating lunch at some of these excellent field meal locations.
Yeah, you really can't go wrong eating anywhere outside in Yellowstone or the Tetons for that matter. And it also gives us the ability to kind of pair some of our other on-trip offerings with these meals. One of which is Aaron Bott in his conversation about wolves in the Tetons, or excuse me, in the greater Yellowstone ecosystem. We'll spend some time with him. There might be some other opportunities, sounds like, to talk with some of the locals, some of the people that really have their boots on the ground in this area. But Kurt, what other sort of things can we expect to get into as we progress throughout this trip?
Just in terms of like activities that we're doing on any given day.
Yeah, any given day, whether it's walking on the boardwalks or general sightseeing, that sort of thing.
Yeah, so like Drew said, one of the things that really makes Yellowstone so exceptional is the geothermals. So it looks like we're looking at Midway Geyser Basin here and the Grand Prismatic, which is one of about 10,000 geothermal things. And we definitely don't get to all of them, but we go to some of the most spectacular. So we're going to make sure that you're going to see examples of a geyser, of a hot spring, of mud pots, and a fumarole. And so those 4 things make up the 4 different types of geothermal things that's made Yellowstone so famous, and is truly the reason that it became the world's first national park. So yeah, we definitely get out and stretch our legs. You can see that these pathways are kind of narrow. And so on some of those walks, we will be wearing masks. But we get out around the Old Faithful area. We oftentimes get to see more than just Old Faithful erupt, and yeah, just get out and about and stretch our legs. We get out quite a bit for wildlife viewing, setting up scopes, anything that's inspiring, we'll take a stop for.
And on those boardwalks, are they pretty accessible? I mean, am I going to be worried about falling off, or those are pretty well maintained typically?
Yeah, they're very well maintained, and it's the boardwalks exist partly to protect the fragile geothermal things, but also for safety, and just making sure people keep their distance from these things, which are in many cases very acidic and pushing 190 degrees in some cases. So yeah, they're very safe to walk around, and we just have to work a little bit harder to make sure that we are providing adequate and safe space. But we know a lot of places that are off the beaten path that are great little secret places tucked away in Yellowstone.
And again, just to highlight the use of masks, I can't say it enough, that whenever possible, or whenever necessary anyway, that we'll want to keep those on. But Drew, you had mentioned earlier about a little bit harder gear and some of the more trail-worthy stuff of note. Do you want to shed some light on what that gear might be, and as you can see in this picture, maybe what some of that landscape looks like that we'll be walking amongst, or potentially walking amongst, when we would use that gear?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll mention, building on what Kurt said in terms of the boardwalks. There's plenty of opportunity for walking on boardwalks. The Park Service have devised them in such a way that you can really get quite close to some of these geothermal features quite safely. But then it's also nice to get off away from the boardwalks and get more onto some of the trails, get away from the roadside, and have some time for just peace and reflection, and some unexpected wildlife encounters off away from the vehicle. So this is an example of one of the trails that we may hike on. One of the beautiful things about the itinerary that's been so carefully designed by Natural Habitat is that we can access these boardwalks, these trails at periods of the day when visitation is lower. So Yellowstone can be busy in the summer, no doubt, but we make an expressed effort and execute our days in such a way that we avoid those groups. So this is an afternoon hike, kind of a later afternoon hike up an area called Trout Lake, which is close to Cook City in the northeast corner of the park. You can see the trail. Well, the trail's a little obscured by some of that vegetation, but it's a narrow footpath. There's some roots. We may offer a hiking activity like this for those that are interested, and then for the section of the group that may not be interested, we'll just do more wildlife viewing from the vehicles. But we will have the opportunity to do some more off boardwalk hikes on trails. So again, I want to emphasize the importance of good waterproof hiking footwear, preferably kind of over the ankle. I want to emphasize trekking poles. So we'll provide trekking poles for you on these hikes. Sometimes a trekking pole can even be useful getting out of the van to look at a spotting scope and look at a distant wolf. So those trekking poles end up being quite important. And we make sure to clean all that equipment in between use so that we're meeting our protocols and meeting those high standards of safety during the COVID period. But yeah, you'll carry a day pack with you on these hikes, binoculars, water, and we might be away from the vehicle for 45 minutes, an hour, depending on the group. So this is another hike. This is kind of in the Lamar Valley. And this hike involves kind of a very gradual descent to a bridge which crosses the river, and then we head up on these flats. And in this particular day, we had pronghorn walking in the distance beyond our group. We had elk. This is an area where earlier in the day we'd heard wolf howling. So you do get the opportunity to get a sense of place and connection and spend some time out away from the vehicles. And when we are outdoors, you know, if we can maintain that 6 feet of physical distance, we don't, you know, you can pull that mask down depending on the regulations in the area that we'll be traveling.
And so you guys, I think that what everyone's waiting for here is some chatter about wildlife and what we can expect to see. Before we get to those beautiful photos that the two of you have taken, Kurt, you want to walk me through some of the etiquette of wildlife viewing in Yellowstone and maybe what that scene would look like in the context of a NatHab trip?
Yeah, it's a really important point that we take, you know, wildlife watching and wildlife photography ethics really seriously. And the park has their own hard and fast rules where they say 25 yards from any wildlife except for wolves and bears, which is 100 yards. To be honest, 25 yards with a bison that's in a bad mood is a little bit on the close side. So instead of thinking specifically about the number of yards we are exactly away from an animal, I think most of us, when we're out there, we're just watching the animals to see if we're seeing any signs of stress. So my general rule is that if we're changing the behavior of an animal, if we're shifting, you know, where it wants to go or what it wants to do, then we're doing something wrong, and we're gonna fix that really quickly. But I think we're really good at making sure, at reading the animals, and making sure that we're not putting any sort of stress on them. And that can be really important for photographers. But as you can see in this picture, one of the best ways to experience wildlife is through spotting scopes. And I'm a little bit unique in that I'm both a photographer and a naturalist. And so I actually love scopes and take scopes really seriously, and we use them, and I love using them. And I actually have this right on my desk. We oftentimes carry something like this. Your guide may have something like this that you can attach to your spotting scope, and that's really fun. That's called Digiscoping. And it doesn't mean that you're going to get a picture that you can frame and put on your wall like I would with my other cameras, but you can still watch it through your phone, take pictures, and we're oftentimes doing that from a distance of 1 to 2 miles away. But through a spotting scope, it's powerful enough that you can see really good stuff. Obviously, we all carry binoculars, and that's a great way to be in the presence of animals and not make them stressed. And like we talked about before with the hatches, just using these hatches does make the animals much more comfortable. So using this picture as an example, you can see that these bison are not stressed out in any way. They're just doing their thing. But if these people got out and walked out onto the road and took a few more steps towards these bison, my guess is their behavior would change, and that would stress them out a little bit. So all those things we implement just to you know, make sure that we're getting great images, but doing so in a very ethical way.
Let's talk animals then. What are we likely to see? And we're kind of approaching the end of our webinar here, so we won't want to spend too much time on what these individuals are, and I certainly haven't included a picture of everything we might see on a trip like this. But as I click through, if either of you, one of you, wants to just give a little blurb on what we're looking at.
I'm seeing this correctly. That looks like a baby grizzly bear. I'm just kidding. So that looks like something called a Uinta ground squirrel. It's kind of fun to think about the little things just as much as the big things. This has a very fascinating natural history, this really, really long hibernator. So during the months of April through mid-August, we see these everywhere, and they're like the foundation of the ecosystem's predators.
Sometimes I kind of wish I could spend parts of the winter like that ground squirrel, and but this little creature here is this is a weasel, a long-tailed weasel, and these are incredibly active animals year-round. So they have such high metabolic needs, they can't afford to put on any fat. They are in and out of rock fields, mostly hunting for rodents. And that little creature has so much power and energy in it. These animals can kill maybe 30 rodents at a time, cache those carcasses away, and then come back and feed on them a little bit later. I should also note that they use the fur of the animals they kill to create bedding, which it's a little strange, but it also is incredibly efficient and creates a lot of insulation for those animals during the winter months.
I'll take this one too, just because, probably like Drew, this is one of my favorite animals in the world. Locally, these things have a few nicknames, but the proper name for these guys is pronghorn. This looks like a pronghorn male based on the size of the horns and the black mark on the cheek. But these guys have such an interesting natural history. They're built specifically to be the fastest land mammal in the Western Hemisphere. So nothing can catch a pronghorn. None of our predators can even come close because they can get up to speeds of 60 miles per hour. So everything about their anatomy, everything about their physiology allows these guys to be extraordinarily fast. So they're just fascinating.
I shouldn't call them speed goats.
I like that nickname too.
All right, well, the North American bison. Wow, this animal, if anything, sort of typifies and epitomizes the symbol of wildness in North America, it's the North American bison. You know, these animals were at one time reduced in population to the point where, frankly, it's a miracle that we still have them on the plains of Yellowstone today. An animal that we'll see a lot of over the course of the trip, but that doesn't mean that it's not a special animal to see. Incredible impact on the environment. Imagine prior to westward expansion in pre-Columbian times, there could have been 60 million of these animals on a landscape. The weight of all those hooves, all their droppings, their wallows that they create in the sagebrush steppe is incredible habitat for so many different animals. And really, they're one of these keystone species that really has a critical impact to their surroundings.
Take this one since this is my picture of a moose baby. And so, yeah, Jackson Hole in particular is a great place to see moose. We see them sometimes up in Yellowstone, but we seem to have better luck down in Grand Teton. So these are a member of the deer family, technically the world's biggest deer. And they're just really popular. I've never met anybody who didn't love hanging out with a big bull moose or a mom and baby like this one. So yeah, we're very proud of our moose population here in Jackson Hole.
I've found when guiding trips in this area that a lot of times the moose is the item, the bucket list item for people to see over some of these next two that we're going to see, bears and wolves even.
All right. Well, I mentioned that we've designed the itinerary of these trips around Cook City, that northeast corner of Yellowstone, the Lamar Valley, and this is the animal, the gray wolf, of course, that we're all really hoping to spend some time in the presence of. And your chances are quite good in the Lamar Valley. Right now, there's a pack of wolves up there that's pushing 30 animals, which is just incredibly unusual, but allows us the opportunity to really have great chances to potentially encounter these wolves. The thing that's so special about our trips is that, we'll get out there early in the morning, maybe when it's just beginning to get light. And though, of course, everybody wants to see a wolf, it can be just as powerful to just be in the presence of wolves. So to see their tracks on the side of the road from the previous evening, the tracks in the puddles, in the mud, to hear them howling is just an unforgettable experience, and an experience that we often have on the course of these trips. So wolves definitely, we'll spend a lot of time talking about these animals as these trips continue.
And last but not least, Kurt, before I open the floor to questions at the end of the hour here.
Yeah. So yeah, definitely another bucket list item is the grizzly bear. And I actually did an entire webinar a couple months ago about the story of this particular female and her mom. So one of the things that I think people really enjoy about coming here is just hearing the stories, because our goal is basically to try and get you to fall in love with this place as much as we are in love with this place. And I think one of the ways we do that, whether it's with wolves and grizzlies in particular, is telling you some of the stories. So the story of this bear is one of my favorite stories in the world. And I guide a lot of places around the world. But the story of this bear, who's known as 610, her mom's the famous 399. This was taken last summer in Grand Teton National Park, but chances are your guide will tell you the story. And even if you don't get to see these famous bears, you're still gonna fall in love with them, I think.
Yeah, I love the way you frame that. You know, the more you care about a place, the more inclined you are to care for it, as I always say. And so with that, unless you guys have anything else you want to tack on to the end here, Kendall, I think we're ready for questions.
Great, we've got some good questions for you. And I just want to remind everyone who's watching, if you have a question for our panel today, you can submit those in your control panel under the questions field. Okay, how many people are in each Sprinter van?
Well, I can catch that one. So we're going to have 7 guests per van. Everybody gets a window seat. These vans are designed specifically to be spacious to begin with, but we're essentially, these are 11 passenger vans, so far fewer than the actual capacity from the manufacturer.
And will dinner always be together inside of a restaurant?
Renata?
So I think what we're meaning is, will everyone always be at the same table inside of a restaurant? So I'll address the question to that extent. So when our first and foremost goal during times of traveling during COVID is to use outdoor eating spaces as much as possible. So that is always our first choice. After outdoor eating spaces is doing inside in a private room where everyone can be spaced out, and that way you can hear each other. It's a more intimate experience, and we're allowing for that social distancing. And then if that is not available, the next level that we go to is ensuring that the restaurant is meeting those federal requirements for capacity. So usually it's like 20–50% right now. However, that could change as we get more and more of the population vaccinated. But then we will be seating individuals by travel parties or where they can be socially distanced at the table. So hopefully that answers that question.
Great, perfect.
I can maybe add something there as well. Just with the trips that we've been running for the last few months, I think the key has just been to be, we're just super flexible right now and asking everyone who's traveling with us to be flexible. So like as one example, one week we went into a restaurant and everything was super spaced out and we felt very comfortable eating there. And then the next week we got there and it was jam-packed with people not wearing masks. And so we just pivoted and switched to another restaurant in one case. In another case, we switched to takeout. So that's sort of how we've been running things, is just kind of rolling with things that sometimes are unexpected and out of our control.
That's great to have that flexibility. Thank you. Okay, so back to packing question. Is a NatHab backpack too large to bring?
No, so the backpacks that NatHab provides is actually an ideal day pack. So you'll have your duffel bag where your clothing that you don't need access to during the day, that'll be packed away in a vehicle. But your day pack, and a NatHab style day pack is a perfect example of what you'd want to have with you, with your binoculars, your water bottle, your mug, and then any medications that you might need for the day, an extra mask. These things that you very possibly could need to access during the day, sunscreen, bug repellent, things like that.
And is it okay if people bring their own trekking poles?
Yeah, yep. I think you know, travel is even more challenging now, And so the trekking poles that we provide are really excellent, and they're adjustable, and that removes you having to travel with them, the headache of traveling with them. But that being said, you're more than welcome to bring your own poles. One thing that we do ask though is that when you do whatever you end up packing, try to minimize the things that are hanging off your luggage. What I mean is you don't want to have a pair of boots tied to the outside of your duffel or trekking poles sticking out, because that makes it challenging to load the vans. But by all means, if you do want to bring your own trekking poles, feel able. Okay,
great. So the one person asked about different fitness levels of a group, and if certain people in a group want a little bit more of a challenging, hike, say, is that possible?
I'll take that one. Absolutely, yeah. That's one of the nice things about these trips, having 2 guides, plus 2 vans, plus a support vehicle, is it also allows us to be super flexible. So like Drew said earlier, we can split and mix the people around, and have some folks go on a hike, and sometimes walking with the naturalist means that it's a pretty slow hike because we tend to get distracted easily. But we also could fit in something more difficult, and there's no shortage of difficult terrain. If we had that special request, we would almost always be able to accommodate that.
Mm-hmm. And if someone were to bring just one pair of shoes, what would you recommend they be?
Well, I would bring a pair of leather hiking boots. Now, they don't necessarily have to be a full grain leather. They could be suede with some panels of nylon, but we will potentially hike in the rain, or be certainly viewing wildlife in the rain, stepping out of vehicles to look through spotting scopes. So having waterproof footwear is highly desirable. One thing I neglected to mention in my gear list before is to have a pair of light shoes as well. So maybe a pair of running shoes, or something that you can wear in the evenings, or if your hiking boots get wet. But if I was to bring one pair, and often as a guide I strive for that, I bring my leather hiking boots that are tall enough to give me a little ankle support and have a nice lugged sole.
Okay, great. So for those people who are coming here from sea level, do you have any tips on helping with adjustment to the altitude?
Yeah, we do see people sometimes struggling that first night. And so one of the main things you can do is simply stay really hydrate while you're traveling, hydrate when you get here, take it easy that first day. People acclimate really quickly. So, by the second or third day, you might still feel the elevation, but it won't, it's rare. We're not going to be that high. So Jackson's at 6,200. Cook City's a little bit higher. So we don't typically get people who feel really, really badly. But when people are coming from sea level, they might feel a little bit of a headache or just not feel 100% that first day. Yeah, does that sound about right, Drew?
Yeah, absolutely. And hydration is such a key to staying healthy in general, and helping your body to acclimatize. And I will mention that there are plenty of opportunities for us to stop and use restrooms. So we always encourage people to not hesitate to hydrate out of fear that there won't be rest stops. We have plenty of rest stops.
So photography question, someone's wondering, what focal length lens would you recommend bringing?
That's a tough one. I would say that Yellowstone is the land of big lenses. So if you're coming in and photography is really the objective, then I'd suggest bringing your longest lenses. And what I do, even as a guide, is occasionally, I think I'm going to do this in a couple of weeks, I'm going to rent a lens for the week, and rent like a 500 or 600. But typically I'm carrying around a handful of different lenses, somewhere like, I think Nikon and Canon both have a really good 100 to 400. So it's not enormous. It's not like so bulky you can't handhold it. but it's a pretty versatile lens to be able to shoot 100 to 400 and get that much reach. So if I had to answer that with just one lens, that's the one I'd probably suggest.
Yeah, Kurt, I carry a suite of lenses that ranges from 14 up to 200. And if I'm looking for wildlife, the 200 is quite frankly not enough.
Okay, great. And we've got a couple testing questions here, so I'm going to combine them. Is a COVID test recommended or required? And if someone is vaccinated, do they still need to provide a COVID test prior to departure?
So COVID, we do not require testing to come on our domestic trips or international unless it's required by the country that we are entering. But we do highly recommend it. If you are traveling, it's just a good thing as another precautionary measure to take. So yeah, recommend that you get it. If you are vaccinated, you can get it as well. You can still, if you are vaccinated, you can still, it's a much lower risk, but you can still transmit COVID. We're actually excited for the CDC to be coming out with their recommendations on how to interact with groups once you're vaccinated. That should be coming out within the next week and a half. So we will all have more information on that. But yes, testing just recommended.
All right, great. Well, we've addressed all the questions that have come in. I do want to emphasize to everyone watching, if questions come up after this webinar, please do get in touch with your adventure specialist. They're always happy to help you. All right, panel, thank you so much. This has been very informative. I appreciate your time. I'm going to hand it back to all of you for closing comments, and we'll start with Corbin.
Yeah, thank you, Kendall. Always a pleasure. Once again, guys, awesome to be back in the saddle with you, and I look forward to seeing you in May.
And Kurt?
Yeah, look forward to seeing everybody. Yeah, hopefully we've gotten you excited about this amazing place, Yellowstone and Grand Teton, and that we get to see you out here in the next year.
And Drew?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the days are getting longer, the snow is melting. It won't be long at all until the roads are open in Yellowstone and trips will be running. So please, if you have questions, feel free to reach out. We'll help make sure that you're prepared for these upcoming trips. And one thing that is really particularly special about some of the early summer trips are the wildflowers. So on top of wildlife, bring your macro lenses as well, because there's a lot to see off those boardwalks beyond wildlife and beyond thermal features.
And Renata?
So I will not be joining you in the field. I love hearing the feedback from our guests and our guides after our trips have completed. So have an incredible time this spring and summer, and we're so excited to get you guys out there for your Yellowstone adventure.
Great, thank you so much for taking the time to present for us today. And remember, if you have another question, please get in touch with your adventure specialist. They're always here to help you out. Thank you everyone for tuning in today. We did record today's presentation, so we'll have the replay out to you soon. And with that, I'll conclude the webinar. Goodbye, everybody.
Yeah.
Hi guys,
Thanks.
Thank you.